Ambulances from the Egyptian side of the Rafah border crossing have been seen heading into Gaza. The reopening of the enclave's southern crossing marking a major step in the U.S. backed peace plan's second phase. Israel has kept it closed since its forces seized it in May 2024. But for the moment, the Rafah gate is only being used on a trial basis, and key details are still unclear. Many Palestinians have been waiting for this moment as they head to Egypt for medical treatment. For more on this, we can bring in Dr. James Smith, the Deputy Director of University College of London's Humanitarian Policy and Practice Program, and he's also an emergency physician. James, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for talking with us.
Thanks, Catherine.
Now, James, I understand you worked in Gaza as a doctor. During the time that you were there, the Rafah crossing was closed. So, how significant is this reopening, even if it's just a partial reopening, in your opinion?
So the Rafah crossing actually was occupied and destroyed during the time that I was in Gaza. We were involved with medical evacuations for children and adults that needed treatment that was no longer available in Gaza. At that time, there were several severely injured Palestinian patients that were moving through the Rafah crossing on an almost daily basis. And of course, humanitarian aid was passing through as well. There were hundreds and thousands of trucks parked on the other side of the Rafah crossing, waiting to enter. Since May of 2024, as you've reported, the Rafah crossing has been occupied by the Israeli military. Closed, I think, is not quite the right term. It's been forcibly blocked by Israeli soldiers, by the Israeli military, as part of a wider strategy of weaponizing the selective dispensation of humanitarian aid to the Palestinian people. Under international law, the obligations imposed on Israel as the occupying power are very clear. The Rafah crossing should have remained open, and it has been intentionally obstructed in order to multiply the suffering inflicted upon the Palestinian people. This latest announcement has potential, but of course, all of the caveats that you've mentioned are deeply concerning. The Rafah crossing should remain open. There should be no restrictions imposed on the number of patients that are able to leave, the Palestinians that are able to return. The movement of humanitarian aid and humanitarian workers should be facilitated to the greatest extent possible. And this is, of course, a crossing that needs to be managed by the Palestinian sovereign powers.
Now, James, when you were there, you touched on this a little bit. I wondered if you could maybe expand a bit more on the impact that the closure had on the humanitarian situation. You talked about, aid being held up, but what other sort of things were happening when you were there?
I mean, it was catastrophic, Catherine. When the Israeli forces invaded and occupied Rafah, the city, the big city in the south of Gaza, all of a sudden, all of the medical evacuations were suspended. We weren't able to move patients out. Patients died because they were unable to leave Gaza. Several patients that were in our care, humanitarian workers weren't able to come or go. And of course, all of the aid was blocked. Many of us have reported for more than 2 years now on the thousands of trucks that are parked in the Sinai on the Egyptian side of the border, with humanitarian aid wasting under the sun there. Israel has, as I've mentioned, instrumentalized and weaponized aid in a way that we haven't seen before. And this has been well documented and well reported. And unfortunately, the vast majority of those with power and influence globally have sat idly by, at best. At worst, have been actively involved, have been complicit in this strategy of suffocating the Palestinian people. And of course, this strategy, coupled with the continuation of direct military violence, was what has allowed the genocide to continue and to deepen. day on day for more than 2.5 years now.
Now, James, I want to ask you about Israel's announcement that it's most likely going to ban the operation of Doctors Without Borders because the organization is refusing to provide a list of its Palestinian staff. What do you think about this decision?
Again, this is another instance of Israel weaponizing and instrumentalizing the dispensation of humanitarian aid. Back in December of 2024, Israel announced that it would impose new registration requirements on NGOs. Those requirements concern the transfer of staff lists, confidential staff information, but also organizations had to promise Israel that they would not participate or call for accountability and justice processes, that they wouldn't support investigations into Israeli soldiers or Israeli politicians, that they wouldn't call for a boycott of the state of Israel or its corporations. These, of course, are very clear red lines for humanitarian organizations. What Israel is doing here is selectively titrating the provision of humanitarian aid, is ensuring that it works with NGOs that it can manipulate to the greatest extent possible, such that the genocide can continue, but without the continuous military strikes and gunfire. So we're seeing the creation of, or the continuation of the creation of, sorry, the continuation of the conditions of life that are intended to bring about, in whole or in part, the destruction of the Palestinian people.
Yes, yes.
And this is that strategy. The manipulation of NGOs, the banning of NGOs is that strategy in practice.
Thank you so much, James, for speaking with us today, sharing your expertise. That's Dr. James Smith, the Deputy Director of University College of London's Humanitarian Policy and Practice Program. We're heading now